everyone. Thank you for joining us for a very special event we have planned for you today. We have an amazing panel of business leaders who will be sharing their insights into how we see print changing in our uncertain COVID-19 environment. Moderating the panel discussion is Sriram Atchutuni, who is the Senior Vice President of Global Sales and Marketing at Pharos Systems. And before I hand it over to Sriram to introduce each of our panelists, I wanted to call your attention to the questions panel on your screen. If, while we're going through the discussion today, if you have a question for a specific panelist or for all of them, type your question into the panel there, and we will work on weaving your questions into the discussion as we have our conversation today. So with that, Sriram, I'm going to hand it over to you to introduce our wonderful panelists and get started.
Awesome. Well, thank you, Lindsay. Just checking in if all of our panelists are aboard yet. Lindsay, do we have Chuck yet?
We do not have Chuck.
Okay. All right. So maybe if you can just keep an eye out and let me know when that happens, because we're looking at the list here. So first, it's my pleasure to introduce the panel, and I just want to go ahead and I'll do that. Want to just thank everybody for joining today. Thank you so much for taking the time out of your busy day, and hopefully the long weekend was good for you guys, for guys in the U.S. coming back. So here we are today with a very exclusive panel, and we're going to discuss about the state of print and our response to the new world that we're living in. The purpose of this really is for us to kind of gather together as different vantage points from the industry, and see how we are preparing to it today and come out hopefully much stronger on the other end together. So with that, I'm very honored and very excited. If I am mumbling and fumbling, it's because I'm excited to be with the peers and with the people on the call here, the panelists. So it's my honor to present and introduce the folks here. So Jeff Schaus. Jeff is the head of commercial software print services and solutions with HP. As you guys know, HP is a leader in the market for providing print services, products, and solutions. So Jeff heads the HP's commercial software business in the print services and solutions, responsible for the portfolio of offerings and the go-to-market strategy for HP's growing solutions business. So Jeff, thank you again for joining. I'm sure we're going to have tons of questions for you on the go-to-market and how things are going. So thanks so much for joining. Then we have Chad. Chad is with Cranel. Cranel is a leading distributor in the print industry. For the folks who have been in the industry, I'm sure you've heard of them or worked with them in some fashion. Chad is a senior manager of Cranel's product portfolio. He has been with Cranel for about 17 years, and he's responsible for identifying key partnerships and technologies that help Cranel's 1,200 plus partners and support their end customers. So that's awesome, Chad. I don't know how you do what you do and manage to work with 1,200 plus partners. That's quite an astounding number. And looking forward to your thoughts on how the partners and the dealer community in particular is, responding to the situation we're all in. And I'm also very pleased to have Louella Fernandes, who's a director at Quocirca, a leading industry market research and insights firm. So if you have been in print industry for any duration of time, I am sure you have come across some or other article or a research article that Louella has penned. She's over 25 years of experience in the sector. When she talks, we know this is an industry expert and a leader who's in the space talking. In particular, if you guys haven't read, there's the most recent thing that I've read from her. It's a Print 2025 Global Market Insight Study, and it's maybe some of that we'll be asking her some questions, so hopefully we'll get some insights onto what the future holds. So, Louella, thank you for joining us today.
Hey folks, Chuck Morgan is here. Can you hear me now?
Awesome. Thank you, Chuck. Yes, we can hear you. Thank you for joining,
good.
Chuck. Yeah, I
Yeah,
was
I was
just
on
waiting.
earlier and had some technical problems, I guess. Couldn't hear me.
Oh, no problem. Thank you for joining. You can hear me
You
okay,
bet.
right, Chuck?
I can.
Awesome.
I can.
Okay, awesome. So I waited for you to join so I can introduce you to the audience as well. So Chuck Morgan is the Senior Vice President of Enterprise Lifecycle and Endpoint Analytics at Wells Fargo. I will say, Chuck, you get the award for the longest title. uh, he's responsible for following all of these following. It's for the bank, which is the Enterprise Managed Print Services, Enterprise Endpoint and PC Life Services, Enterprise Configuration Services, and Enterprise Endpoint Analytics. That's a lot of things under you, Chuck. We got
Great.
tons of questions for you.
Yeah, makes for busy days. Does make for busy days.
It sure does. Looks like a lot of things. So it's awesome. Well, thank you for giving us the time. I know we're all very important people and have tons of things. So really can't thank you more for taking the time out. So with that said, what we have done today is we have lots of people who registered, and as we see, they're already signing up here and joining. We've already asked our audience to submit questions during the registration time, and a lot of questions we have got is through that process, and some we've actually kind of teed up for you guys. And then, of course, we also encourage the audience to type in their questions as we go along here. So with that, first, wanted to talk a little bit about business continuity. We all have gone through these. We have done this at Pharos, and I'm sure every business leader in the country right now has some sort of a business plan or a business continuity plan. And in specific to print, we'll get to those trends. So maybe first I can ask you, Chuck, as Wells Fargo, could you talk a little bit about your business continuity plans, how they came about, maybe give us a
Sure.
little bit insight into how Wells Fargo prepared for it?
Sure. Well, I think like most large corporations, and for that matter, every business out there, we saw something on the horizon late February in that time frame, and as that looked like, of course, local Fed, state governments were going to start to enact shelter in place. Limitations with respect to large gatherings, things of that nature. So we started our planning, again, it was on or around mid-February. And again, my responsibility for the firm is kind of multifaceted, but it is both the compute device, be it PC, tablet, convertibles, thin clients, all of those products, as well as the print environment. So we kind of quickly started our planning around, what was a work from home scenario going to look like, and how are we best going to be able to support the firm's needs to send home upwards of close to 190,000 U.S. domestic team members and approximately 55,000 international team members. So we were doing things like, of course, looking at what's our security environment specific to, and I'll go back to print now. What's the security environment around print and print from what we'll call remote locations, assuming for the most part people's homes. So that was, I think, first and foremost, one of our primary considerations. And then secondarily, it was, really who should be printing from home. I think each of us, being involved in the print environments for small, medium, and large firms, would of course say a lot of what we're trending towards now is print. Why are people printing? Do they have a
Mm-hmm.
need to print? And is it specific to their job, or is it convenience or other, things driving print? So we also kind of at the same time of our planning undertook a process in which that we were looking at, who's printing, what are they printing, and why are they printing? So we also then started a process by which there was exceptions, if you will, for at-home printing that we put into place. So we really knew who was printing, what they were printing, and why they were printing.
Mm-hmm.
So that's kind of really how we approached our, work from home plans. Again, multifaceted. It was hardware availability. It was security, kind of first and foremost security. Then it was, well, who did we have to enable with a device? Because of course, not
Mm-hmm.
everybody had something in which that they could either transport home, or of course something at home in which that was already Wells Fargo owned. And that is
Mm-hmm.
also, by the way, a requirement within our space. And is that if people are printing, they're printing on a wholly owned device by the firm itself. So, trends, we continue to look at all of those things, continuing to tighten up our what we'll call exception process and managing print via our AD and our security environments, our in-point data loss prevention teams very much involved with my team in things of this nature. So that's kind of where we're at. We are seeing the behavior, and I see that as kind of part and piece of, last thought here. The behavior of our users really has been quite, in my mind, what would be the word? Good, pleasing, and is that we don't have a lot of people that are, demanding to print when it doesn't really show a need within their job and job function. So, not a ton of pushback. So, I can tell you we've got, of course, 180,000 plus people working from home thereabouts right now. And I have personally, and my team, because we approve all print devices function across the firm. We've approved, of course, quite a few, but not to the
Mm-hmm.
extent that you would think. We're probably less than 5% of our at-home our at-home work effort right now are printing. So, those are good things. Those are good things. So that's kind of where we are.
Yeah. So leading to that, one other question is what's your ratio from a work from home to being in the office? Since you guys are in a financial world.
We're right now, and again, I'm guesstimating a little bit.
Sure.
But I can tell you we're probably at a 15 to 20% at best in the office. The remainder of the entire workforce and team member environment is working from home. Of course, those jobs that dictate being on site, and quite frankly, and you guys a little thought about some of my responsibilities. You saw that configuration services. I've got
Mm-hmm.
3 large centers spread across the country where we pre-configure our PC, our routers, our switches, a bunch of other varieties of peripheral equipment. Those folks had to work on site. I mean, obviously, if they're not there, that equipment's not getting configured. So that would be an example. Of course, some of our operations centers all still working in a Wells Fargo office with lots of restrictions around, of course, social distancing, enhanced disinfecting, cleansing protocols, all those things in place. So again, I'd estimate 80-20 at this point, 80 home, 20 in the office.
Okay. Jeff, same question from an HP point of view, right? But from looking from how did you prepare for your business continuity, and what have you seen? We heard Chuck talk about it from potentially we can call it customer point of view as a user of the print devices and what goes into their system of how they are looking at it. From a print vendor or somebody who's supplying that, would you mind kind of giving us your perspective on how you see from first of all, your business continuity plans? And I know you guys did an amazing job with like 3D printing of, and we also do some work for the community. So it'd be great if you can chime in and talk a little bit about that.
Yeah, sure, happy to. So, I think like everyone, we saw some trends, starting to emerge. Of course, the position for HP, we saw the trends really in early January with, the situation in China, quickly spreading to Korea, as well as Singapore, where we have, operations in all 3, of those countries. So we took some pretty decisive action early to have people, in those locations work from home. We limited travel, restricted travel to, really to our Asia Pacific region, both in and out of the region, and then continue to monitor the situation, throughout the, around the world. And so, we had a phased approach in terms of, as hotspots started to emerge, we would, enable people to work from home. Really require them to work from home and keep the business, really running. Of course, it causes challenges with your, supply chain. I think in the beginning, what we saw was, probably more of a supply challenge, and then, as the rest of the world started to get impacted, then we started to see, more of a demand, challenge, feathered in with some continued supply challenges. But essentially today, we have everyone, in the company who can work from home is working from home. There are exceptions in terms of manufacturing, and we have some employees who are starting to return to the office in other locations that have come out of of the crisis. So in Wuhan, for example, we do have some people working from home, or sorry, working in the office, but still a blend where we still have people even in those communities that have seen recovery, enabling people to continue to work from home, keeping social distancing in the office space, taking some measures where we have, A and B, populations. So you may have the A population, work from the office one day, and then the B population works the next day. Of course, there's a lot of, cleaning that goes on throughout the day, as well as, in between, kind of shifts of different people coming into the office. We'll be slower, most likely, and having people return to offices than what maybe the governments are allowing to have happen. But it's all just around business continuity for us, health and safety of the employees, and as well as our partners. So that's been the focus for us is really maintaining that health. And we're in maybe a different situation than some of our customers in that most people at HP have been accustomed to being able to work from home, while not required. They've been able to, and so the transition to allowing people to work from home was perhaps a little bit easier for us than for Wells Fargo, as an example. And so that's been. That's obviously been helpful. We don't have to train people to work from home, or we don't have to, enable them with equipment because they already had the equipment. So that's been helpful. But it still comes with some challenges. But I think for the most part, it was a pretty smooth transition, and people were happy with it. So that allowed us, I think, to then to shift to, okay, how do we help our customers make this transition to working from home? And Chuck mentioned the need for security. So one of the one of the things we did is we did a number of webinars with our security advisory services group, as well as made them available to to our customers, and frankly, really to anyone who needed help in transitioning workers to work from home securely, and obviously to print securely from home as well. So available for consulting in terms of how to make that happen. And it wasn't just about print; it was about other endpoint devices as well, and just how you could make that transition. And then overall, HP has been responding, to local needs with our technology, where we could help, with 3D printing of personal protection, equipment, and been providing that to hospitals, as well as providing the plans in an open source way so that other 3D printers around the world could produce materials that would help healthcare workers and communities to be able to withstand the crisis. So those types of things. I think being connected and engaged with the community is really important for us as HP, and I think for many other companies around the world. We're certainly not the only ones that have done that, but it was important for us, and we wanted to enable our technology to help where we could. And even in Puerto Rico, we transitioned to producing hand sanitizer that we've been able to distribute around the world at no charge to the communities who needed it, which has been great. In terms of behavioral changes and what we're seeing, or maybe trends specific to print for our customers. Obviously, with fewer people being in the office, office print has been impacted. But we also see the other side, which is with people moving to working from home. We've seen home print really increase. I can speak from my own personal perspective, and my home printer is working relatively constantly because 2 teenage children needing to print out homework assignments. That's driven some more pages. My wife is an attorney, so she's printing contracts. I get Zoom fatigue sometimes, so being able to print a Quocirca report instead of reading it on my computer screen, and I can enjoy that over a cup of coffee, sitting outside or something, as opposed to reading on my computer screen has been nice. And we're seeing those types of behavior changes happen in that some users they need to print for a variety of different reasons. They just happen to be printing from home. So we helped our managed print customers, for example, make that transition by providing them with an ability to subscribe to Instant Ink, for example. So just an easy way to have ink supplies delivered to their home. We made that transition very quickly with our managed print customers, and now the challenge is, how do you help them bridge to a situation where people will continue to work from home, and they need to make that part of their overall managed print contract. So that's kind of the next phase for us. But we believe that being able to respond to the changes in terms of the personas of, I have my home persona, I have my work from home persona, and then I'll have my personas as I return to the office, and and how do you serve all of those personas and enable print in a secure way.
Thank you, Jeff. No, it's very good to hear the different perspectives, and so thanks for sharing. So we're going to jump right into a lot of questions that we're actually getting as well. So one of the questions that we commonly hear is the print volume is significantly down. I think we've all heard that. So I think this is a question for all of the panelists from a different perspective. So from maybe we'll first jump into to Cranel, to Chad, and say, so Chad, how do you see this from a dealer perspective? How do you see this print volume coming back in the SMB world, from changing gears a little bit from enterprise to an SMB?
Yeah, I think part of the challenge that the SMB community and other verticals like K through 12 education and those kinds of things are the uncertainty of what is going to happen, right? Everybody's making plans slowly to start coming back, doing rotating weeks, or doing platoon efforts by people coming in at certain times. Your print levels will naturally come up in those environments, but people are looking at that similar to it's a common touch point, right? What do you do about a coffee pot? What do you do about that print device that people are going to be touching to copy and fax, and especially the multifunction components? So we're trying to educate our partners on technology that can be touch-free, that can be able to support printing in those environments without heavy touching, right? How do you support those kinds of environments? We've seen our dealer community that is not solution focused really struggle during this time frame, because they're most of our feet on the street, knocking on doors. Nobody's answering because nobody's at work, right? So they're not able to do what they do to build their pipelines and build their business aspect. So the ones that have some solution element or have been selling software in those kinds of environments have been able to at least maintain a level of contact and help with at least planning out what kind of options do they have, whether the school system is going to go to school in fall, or whether they're still going to be at home. They're able to at least have conversations with different technologies to help support what they're doing. And I think that's been very, very interesting in trying to really, we've been focusing heavily on education to our partner community, letting them know what kind of solutions, what kind of cloud-based solutions, what kind of low infrastructure solutions that are available in the marketplace that they can still go ahead and address with their partner community. and their customers, right? So our head has been down building education to give them the tools to arm them, and so they can educate their customers on what the options are, so they can be looked at as one of those people to help make those decisions, because it's real time, right? They're trying to figure out how to get 200 kids through graduation right now, and then really uncertain about what's going to happen in the fall in education, right? In business, some have just shut down, right? And they're trying to figure out how to even reopen. So I think their concerns are not on print. Their concerns on how do they get back, and our focus has been educating the partners on what the options are, right? And it's a change for some of them because they're used to going in with a set, let me talk about these speeds and feeds of a device, being able to give them a step back and more, what are you trying to accomplish and how can I help support that?
Yeah. So on that note, actually, maybe moving to Chuck, from a bank perspective, I know you mentioned about 15 to 20% are now maybe at work, and most of the printing is probably happening at some scale from home, and even from Jeff's point, it's probably happening at some scale from home, as Jeff was printing out Quocirca notes. So Chuck, how do you see this from your perspective? Do you see at the bank the print the way it was before COVID? Once we are maybe back to normal or whatever the normal is. How do you see it from the banking perspective?
Yeah, so I'll back up just a little bit. Excuse me. I can tell you that all of our, what I would call operational print, be it whether it's, our mortgage division, our legal areas, communications, all of that, what I call large volume print, still taking place inside the four walls of our prem. None of that activity is happening from people's homes. So that's one point to make. And secondarily, Chad mentioned one thing in particular, and that really is more around the ability for us to keep up with the demand of a safe and clean environment once we do start migrating back into, Wells Fargo facilities. I think we're all, irregardless of the size of your firm, you're struggling today to get disinfecting products, things in which that we can keep, the physical environment as clean as possible. So I can tell you that myself and the individual that actually leads our managed print program within my space, she and I very much working through strategy sessions and trying to figure out, how do we keep that environment as clean and as disinfected as possible? So when we do return to the office, that people can feel safe when they need to walk up to a print device and either, pin print functionality or just grabbing their job. So I'd say that's one of the biggest concerns that we have. Do I suspect that volumes will return to what they were prior to, our massive BCP event and sending everybody home? I don't. I think, again, it's probably a bit of two things. One, I think as people were working from home for longer periods of time, I think, again, you're going to start to see a little more culture shift around people going, hey, I really don't need to print that document like I used to. So I think that's part of it. I also think there's going to be that potential of some level of fear. People just simply going, I don't want to walk up to that socialized or communal device in which that 30 other people within that 15, 20 foot radius of my workstation are using that same device. So I think that in itself is also going to start to pull back some of the volume in which that we were experiencing before. I would suggest we're probably moving towards a trend of less print versus more.
Okay, no, it makes sense. Thank you very much for sharing that.
You bet.
So this is kind of actually in line with my next slide. It's probably going to take a minute to show on screen. Yep, there it is. So again, with the states relaxing, as we know, I think all 50 states at some scale have relaxed the lockdown, if you will, and are working on coming back to work. So there's going to be a mixture of work from home and office space. So I think you guys have covered this topic really well so far. Is there anything that stands out from what you have done to facilitate this, or doing to facilitate this at your offices, that you would want to share with any business leaders on the call? Chuck or Jeff in particular, because you're large organizations here.
Yeah, go ahead, Jeff. Go ahead.
Okay, yeah, thanks, Chuck. So, I think a couple of things, and Chuck mentioned, will employees feel safe using a shared device? I think it's a really important question. And so one of the things we're doing is, providing, all of our, customers with instructions on, well, how do you keep a multifunction printer clean and sanitized, and how can you do it in a way that doesn't degrade the the equipment? So we have some specific instructions and products on on that. Of course, every business is going to have to make the determination of whether or not that's something that they want to add into their business process. And I think our responsibility is to continue to listen to our our customers about how that how that feels to them, and enable other solutions for them, like like contactless pull printing, for example. How can you limit the number of people who actually have to touch the the device, but still get the the outputs that that they need. So I think those are a couple of things that we're that we're really focused on, and so enabling solutions that allow for for touchless pull print, providing instructions on how to keep a device clean for those who want to who want to use it. And of course, we're also happy to to help people have more printers in their office if they choose. But we're not necessarily expecting that trend to happen as well, where everyone suddenly goes back to having a personal printer on their on their desktop. But these are these are important questions, and I think the most important thing that we can do, and that we must do, is really be in tune with our customers and their needs, and how they need to run their business, and help them from that standpoint, as opposed to help them print more. It's how do you help them run their business, where print is an important component of it, and just be be sensitive to those needs in the environment that we're that we're now operating in.
Mm-hmm. Thank you, Jeff. Yeah, absolutely. It may not be much about how much print you have. It's more about how do I print to begin with. Maybe the paradigm changes a little bit about that. Chuck, do you have any comments?
Yeah, so I can tell you, talking about, at least at this point, a high-level strategy for bringing team members back into the facilities, which again then in turn starts to normalize some of our print environment and what we're doing in that space. So everything we're hearing at this point says we are going to go back in phases. I think that's probably pretty common across corporate America. Of course, non-essential workers, if you will, or non-office essential workers, let me state that a little bit more clearly, are probably going to be the last to go. So I myself would be one of those people, right? I can work from literally anywhere in the world. Just give me a VPN connection, and away I go. So I suspect I'll be at the end, and potentially even into 2021 before I get the green light from what I would call a regular perspective to regularly go back into my office facilities. I assume that will be the case for the rest of the firm. So in turn, I think per some of the points Jeff covered, we of course then will have to have a strategy in place as we start to have people converging back into their office spaces, to ensure that again our what we call our first responder team members are there and capable again of not only assisting the end user with their print needs, but again also ensuring that our environment is safe. So there's some things in which that both contractually, because our first responders actually work for one of our OEM partners, we need to ensure that of course we're good to go with respect to the support in which that we might ask of those first responders, be it keeping our environment clean and extra disinfecting procedures, things of that nature. So, still quite a bit of work to be done. And I can tell you, the one point that Jeff made around giving people back their personal printers, I think each of us cringe when we hear something like that. And is that, the idea around managed print is to create that, socialized environment that everybody can use. It's sized to a point where it manages expense, from all of our bottom line perspective. So taking a step back from that perspective of reissuing, personal printers for everybody would I think be a shot in the heart to each of us that are involved in managed print services. But at the same time, you have to weigh in the health and safety of the employee, the vendors in which that assist you in this space, all of those things. So I guess per se, nothing is off the table. We're going to do everything we have to do to enable our team members, of course, with the tools they need to do their jobs. And of course, printing is part of that. And we'll do it in a manner that is, first and foremost, safe for everybody. So that's kind of my thoughts there.
Thank you, Jeff.
You bet.
Can I add something there, Sriram?
Yeah, please.
Yeah. So another thing is, and this is more looking from the dealer community, right? A lot of what they do is they have technicians and things that are going on site to the customer location, right? So not only are the organizations having to manage what's happening with their own employees, how is that bridge going to happen with the dealer community when they have to go and deliver the hardware equipment and help with the implementations, right? Each one of those are going to have to be patient and understand the work environments that they're going into. So it's going to be a big learning curve for that dealer community and those technicians as they try to establish what does that installation process look like, because that's going to be a change. And in some cases, they may not be able to do that, and it may push off some of their opportunities. We've seen even in remote installations, because they can't get people into the office, that our employees right now, we're not able to help deploy cloud solutions in some scenarios, right? So I think that's another thing that you have to look at from the dealer community is how do they integrate with those safe environments that the corporations and businesses are setting up.
Great points, Chad. So Louella, sorry for keeping you on without get too for too long, and but we were not gonna put you off that easy off the hook. So these were the 5 top investment ideas that you had in your Print 2025 Global Market Insight study. But I believe that was done prior to COVID. So I wanted to ask, and I'm sure you've been talking to the industry across the globe. So the question for you on this one: how do you see these topics that you have highlighted in your research? Do you see them, first of all, change in terms of priority based on where we are today and what you've heard from Jeff, Chad, and Chuck on the call today? So your thoughts.
Yeah, so it's been really interesting actually hearing the conversation so far, because it really kind of validates what we were seeing in the Print 2025 study. So as you say, we conducted this at the end of last year, and the top trends were security, particularly around just general security, but we were already seeing a move to a flexible workforce. So there was an increasing need to be able to secure remote working as well as working in the office environment. So certainly we believe that trend is going to accelerate, particularly in areas such as zero trust security, which we're hearing a lot more about recently because of the need to actually manage this diverse workforce. Excuse me. Secondly, cloud. Yeah, so that was already becoming more mainstream prior to COVID. And again, we believe that the pandemic is going to accelerate the adoption of cloud-based services, particularly with print. I believe the statistic from the Print 2025 report was around 75% of organizations, and this is in the US and Europe, were planning to move some elements of their print infrastructure to the cloud. So there was already that momentum building, that organizations were looking to save costs around their print infrastructure by moving elements to the cloud. So serverless printing, for example, hosting those print servers off-premise. And again, there's an opportunity here for organizations to reinforce that trend by potentially moving to the cloud, because it actually enables a more scalable infrastructure. So when something like this happens, hopefully it doesn't happen again, but if it does, there's the opportunity to actually manage printing on more of a scalable and adaptable infrastructure, rather than print completely stopping and then MPS contracts not being able to adapt or scale. So definitely the cloud trend we see accelerating. MPS, it's interesting, we conducted a COVID impact study, and actually we've just, we're about to publish the third wave of those results, and that's actually amongst industry executives, so channel partners and OEMs. And actually there's the expectation that MPS requirements will actually be less than they were pre-COVID, but actually I think there's the potential for MPS contracts to actually expand beyond the office to encompass home working as well. And from hearing some of the conversation already, I do think that potentially providing that support for home workers will actually be something that's going to be almost the new normal. That's hearing about whether we're moving to a staggered attendance of offices as we go forward. There'll be a need to manage printing in the home environment as well as in the office. And just to clarify also, because we've managed to do a survey amongst home workers, and Chuck just mentioned the 5% figure I heard, 5% of their workers are actually printing. And that pretty much matches the study that we've just released amongst home workers. Only 5% of home workers who were previously working in the office say that their organisation has provided them with a printer for home use. And as a result, many of them are not printing, because even if the majority of them do have access to a home printer, if it's something that they've owned or purchased themselves, they're more cautious about using those devices because of the running costs, the cost of consumables and ink and paper and so on. So the ones that are printing are more likely to be the ones that have been provided a device by their employer, but it's quite a low percentage at the moment. So that may change as we sort of move forward, but at the moment we're not seeing a lot of printing happening in the home, other than for maybe students or educational purposes. But for business purposes, we're seeing that more employees are becoming accustomed to working digitally. They were doing that already, but obviously with virtual collaboration and so on, more employees are becoming used to working without printing. And again, as Chuck said, although there's going to be the mission critical high volume printing that will continue in the office, in terms of printing at home, most people are finding that they can manage without it. And I think this could be a potential threat when we do move back to the office, or these employees go back to the office, that they will have become so accustomed to working without printing that they may decide that they don't need to print when they're in the office. So, it remains to be seen, but that's the trends we're seeing at the moment. So more digital collaboration happening, across all sectors, and as a result, less printing happening now and potentially post-COVID as well.
And any trends you see on the mobility side, where like mobile print is going to be more now before COVID or after COVID, especially with techniques that people have been talking about, like touchless print, things
Yes.
of that nature, right? Which a QR code release and or badge authentication or whatever it may be without touching.
Yeah.
Do you see the mobility increase?
Yep, so as it's already been discussed, the whole move towards contactless printing, we do believe, is going to increase. So pull printing has been quite widespread in certain organisations with high security requirements, but we do expect, because of the need to incorporate a touchless environment, it's almost like the death of the touch screen, whether people will be comfortable using even the kind of the apps on the panels. So we believe that there will be more interest in using smart card printing, even using your smartphone as a device that you release your print jobs. And, even booking meeting rooms instead of using, the meeting room panels outside the meeting rooms, that could all be sort of, zero touch through mobile phones. So there's a potential for integrated capability across these kind of communal areas in an organization. And again, I can't remember who discussed it, but I do think also there's an opportunity to move to more of a distributed print environment, away from the A3 centralized model towards a distributed A4 model. So there'll be less people sharing one printer, not necessarily going, back to the cubicles and the desktop devices, but potentially having more of a balanced deployment where there are less people sharing printers, because I do believe there is that sort of Zoom fatigue, I think, as Jeff mentioned, and there is still a need to want to print. And I think potentially having that capability to allow employees to print when they want it, potentially even submitting print jobs from their home to collect those documents when they're in the office, because that overcomes the security concerns around using home printing devices. We haven't really sort of gone into that in a lot of detail, but I think that's going to be the concerns around printing confidential and sensitive documents in the home on home printers that aren't approved or under the security policy of corporate organizations. I think that's going to be a big challenge and will lead to a lot of less reduced printing in the home office environment.
Thank you, Louella. So this question again is such a broad topic in terms of all the points it covers. So I want to see if we can get a perspective from different points of view. Again, going back to the panelists here. So you mentioned, Louella, about zero trust as a word from a security perspective. And I know that's been something I've been hearing a lot as well, and Pharos, we have invested a lot into that as well. So maybe if I can go around the table effectively, in real life we would have just been around the table, but it's a virtual round table. So maybe we'll start with Jeff. Specifically, Jeff, if you can talk about IT point of view on a security in the cloud, if you can hone in onto what's HP's position on that.
Right. Yeah. So, I mean, I think what we're seeing is with the adoption of, more collaboration tools, more people working from home, end-to-end encryption, from a security standpoint is becoming even more important. And I think you see this in a number of different, studies in terms of where IT executives plan to spend their dollars, and security is definitely one of those areas. I think zero trust is definitely the trend that that we'll continue to see accelerate. And and as you think about managing infrastructure, whether it's print infrastructure or other infrastructure, via cloud, zero trust becomes critical to companies and to the providers. So technology is moving so fast. I mean, having a zero trust point of view from a security standpoint, we think that trend will accelerate. And it was already going there, but again, I just think all the circumstances around COVID take each one of the areas here and really accelerate it. And while I agree with I hope Louella is wrong, but I understand the point on managed print, and people may be printing less as a result of COVID. I think the trend that will accelerate is around everything as a service, and so customers want more services. They want that flexibility. They demand it, and so if you from a service standpoint, if the services you're delivering don't have a security posture around them, customers will go someplace else, regardless of who the service provider is. So that's something that again we just see accelerating as a result of the current circumstances.
Awesome. So Chad, do you see is your observation similar to what HP is seeing from an enterprise perspective, or from what you've heard from Louella, or rather, would you see this as the same top areas of investment from an SMB perspective? Are they jumping on the bandwagon of zero trust? Is that a big deal, or are they not?
Yeah, I don't think it's as big of a deal at the SMB. They're just trying to get through their basic IT infrastructure needs. I think it's a nice to have. What we are seeing though, and what I think is going to spark some of this discussion is the balance between features that we see in more print management solutions that are on-premise versus cloud. They're more feature rich when they're on premise, but I think now based on the current climate and based on some of the accelerated security functionality, people will look at letting go some of those features that they think are really cool on the on-premise print to go for the safety, go for the security components with a cloud infrastructure because it's less for them to maintain. They may give up a little bit, but I think it'll be easier for them in the long run. And that security spawned a lot from the environment that they're in. I think will make a larger impact. They're not going to be as concerned with all of the different features that come on the panel, right? And those kinds of things. It's going to kind of shift away, and it will drift more towards security because it'll be easier to deploy.
It's a good observation. It's a little slight different how the enterprise world is and maybe the SMB is in that sense. And Jeff, didn't mean to say that you guys are not in SMB. I just wanted to ask a different perspective from Chad to see what. And Chuck, is this relevant to you as well? Would you consider these at the top in the order they are, or would you re-rank them in a different order for Wells Fargo?
You know, I would keep them in the order they're in. And I can tell you, you know, of course, us being a financial institution, you know, IT security is paramount. So we're certainly continuing to make investments, both what I would call printing on-prem, be it internal to Wells Fargo's premises, and continuing to expand our tool sets and our capabilities for off-prem or remote printing. Mentioned that, you know, I've got a very close partnership and collaboration going with our endpoint security teams, data loss prevention and endpoint security. So continuing to enhance our tool sets to ensure both on-prem and off-prem security. And I really wouldn't change anything specific to how you've laid out the top investment areas within my firm, definitely falling in line with what I see there.
Awesome. Well, thank you. Well, we have so many questions coming in. I'm pretty sure we can probably spend another few hours here asking you guys all these questions. So we've tried to frame them into points of reference and points of topics that we can get your thoughts on. So I have about 8 minutes left. So what I will do is I'll probably skip through some of the questions because we may have touched on some of these already in some different ways. Because this is a question that came specifically for the dealer market. Chad, how is the dealer community responding? I think we've kind of maybe touched base on this today. One of the things I found this interesting is how about the migration from MFT to SFT or single function device. So that's another interesting concept. For some reason, my screen sharing has been paused. I do not know why. So you're not seeing what I'm seeing on the screen. I apologize for that. I don't know what's going on. Anyway, we will probably go ahead and add a couple other questions. So with just from a time sensitivity checkpoint, we have a few minutes here. So one of the questions that came in that I found very interesting and probably more personal is thinking of each of your roles. How has your role changed in before COVID and post-COVID at your work? Maybe Louella, we'll start with you this time.
So for me, Quocirca, so I'm director of Quocirca, and we do run a lot of regular primary research, but it's interesting, and I've worked from home for 20 years or so, so for that, it hasn't been a major adjustment to me, other than I have my children around, but you know, the actual adjustment in terms of working from home has been pretty sort of seamless. But actually, in terms of the business, it's been interesting because we've run a lot of COVID research for the industry in the last 5 to 6 weeks. And that's probably something that we wouldn't have run sort of such rapid surveys. And we've made investments in sort of different enterprise tools to be able to do that, where we would have outsourced that before. So as a small business, it's been interesting how we've been able to respond quite quickly to the market changes and deliver research very quickly, because I think that's one of the things when for any small business, when something like this happens and disrupts the industry, smaller businesses are perhaps better positioned to react faster, and actually they don't have the kind of corporate inertia that perhaps larger organizations have. So from that perspective, Quocirca has been able to continue doing the research, but been able to sort of deliver it a lot faster than previously.
Good to hear. So you've been working from home for 20 years, so we may ask you for some tips on how you've been doing that.
And I will add, I worked for Canon for 12 years before that, so I went from one extreme of a very corporate workplace to working from home. So yeah, it wasn't an easy adjustment back then.
Awesome. So Chad, how has your role changed since pre-COVID and post-COVID? What do you see? I can maybe preempt a little bit, because I know how much you've been on the field before, knowing you with COVID, and I kind of missed that myself.
Yeah.
How has your role changed?
Our organization Cranel is been around for 35 years, and it's a very Midwestern feel for a company. We have reps that are in the field. We like to sit across tables from people. So it's been a dynamic that we have not necessarily built our business around, right? We have a large field team that's supposed to be working side by side with our partner community, helping them on calls and doing those kinds of things. So we've had to adjust. And I think what we've really looked at doing is try to turn into, instead of a sales support entity, an education entity, and making sure that we're educating our partners on the solutions that fit the now. We sell hardware components, we sell a lot of different things, but trying to shift more towards cloud solutions that help them transmit data safely and things like that, right? Because they're working off of a home network and everything's bogged down, right? A lot of those kinds of things, because if they're like me, they have a 12-year-old boy that plays Fortnite at 2 o'clock in the afternoon and crashes my Wi-Fi network. So I'm really trying to, we're trying to find those solutions that they can still empower their community with. And we're trying to be relevant to our partners, right? We have a lot of partners and we want to be of value to them. And it's just making sure that we're educating our sales reps on the portfolio components that impact our partner community today, and continue to look for new things, right? We're not stopping. We're continuing to look at technology that is now more relevant today than it was a year ago, right? And we have to keep pushing that to make sure that we're able to do that. So a lot of my time is spent looking at those technologies and seeing how we can bring that on board, as well as trying to put together programs of free trials for products and things like that, so that we can get some tire kicking in the partner community as well as their customers, right? Try this product for 60 days, right? It's been really where our focus has been, to help support the partners and give them a reason to call their customers.
Thank you, Chad. And Jeff?
Yeah, I think so for my personal role, I did go into the office prior to COVID, and even though my team is around the world, so we're collaborating virtually on a regular basis. Having everyone work from home changed things, because as a leader, I mean, you have to stay connected to your teams, and you also have to give them some a place for comfort, and then a belief, and then a plan to move forward. So I think from that standpoint, there's been a lot more, maybe emphasis on the comfort part, frankly, and we started seeing this, again in January with the team around the around the globe. But I think for all of us, I mean, we also we get deputized as health professionals, because people are searching for answers, right? And there's a lot of information, of course, out there, and some of it's conflicting, unfortunately, and people don't know necessarily what information to trust. But so they look, I think they look to the people they work with on a regular basis, they trust to provide them with some guidance. And so for us, it's just been really about following the lead of of HP, and just trusting that hey, we're looking, we have the best interest of employees and our customers, partners in mind. So let's just operate from that standpoint. But that's been I would say probably the biggest shift. Not something I expected to have happen. And then the other piece I would say is just bringing all those roles and personas kind of into one. I don't have the the break of driving home from the office anymore. So it's immediately like I walk out of my office, and we've tried to adjust to have more breaks in between meetings now, so you're not just jumping from one Zoom call to the next. But as soon as I walk out of the office, I have the other part of my life, where it's my kids need help with their homework, or they want permission to go do something, and so you have to kind of balance those things all at the same time, versus just answering it over text. So so I think it's the the changes that are impacting all of us, not just from a what we do in our jobs, but how we interact, knowing that our job has really come into our homes now, and it's changed the dynamic quite a bit. So.
Yeah, thank you for sharing that. Very interesting times for sure. Chuck, do you have any couple of comments on how it changed for you? We're just an hour to the end of the hour, but I wanted to make sure we get to your comments. Chuck can hear us. Chuck,
there we go.
Okay.
I was muted there. Yeah, so I would say, my job has really changed from one primary perspective, and that is to, I mean, always we've had this, strategy hat on, and what's the future going to hold. But I think the circumstances in which that we're under today has accelerated the need for us to really have that strategy hat on, and what are we going to do in the future? Clearly, I think a lot of the I shouldn't say a lot, but some of the initiatives in which that we had from a corporate perspective, be it greater density in facilities, greater shared environments around our managed print services, things of that nature. I mean, clearly we've got to rethink some of the things we were doing. So I would suggest, aside from, adjusting to work from home, all the other things that other individuals have talked about, I think really for me, it's shifting into high gear, specific to strategies for the future, and what is the print environment going to look like? Again, how can we continue to ensure expense management, risk mitigation, two very primary areas of focus, obviously within managed print, and a part of my area of responsibility. So just shifting into high gear, really that's it. Security, health and safety, and quite frankly, what is the environment really going to look like when all this is said and done? So lots of unanswered questions there, and things in which that people are looking to me and my team to answer those questions.
Certainly, great points, Chuck. Totally see that. Well, again, thank you so much to the wonderful panelists today for taking the time. I know I ran a little over the hour here, so really appreciate hanging around.
Absolutely.
Lindsay? Yeah, thank you, Chuck. Thank you, everybody. Lindsay, do you want to take it away from here? Any last comments, Lindsay?
Yes, thank you. Can you just go to the slide that's following this one?
Yeah, my slides have kind of betrayed me, Lindsay, towards the end here, so I apologize.
I'll just talk to it then. I just wanted to share that we have a webinar planned for June 11th. I did put the link to register for that in the chat area if anyone would like to click that and register right away. It's all about why Zero Trust networking matters. So in this webinar, there we go. We'll explore the benefits of a zero trust network, how these networks defend against modern cyber threats, and our vision for a safe and convenient print experience. So with that, thank you, Sriram, for moderating today's discussion. I'd also like to give special thanks to each of our panelists. We appreciate your time, your expertise, and your insights, and for making today's discussion as exciting as it was. So thank you to everyone who joined our event. We hope you all enjoy the rest of your day and stay healthy and safe. So thank you very much.
Thank you very much.
Thanks, folks.
Thank you.
Yep, great day. Bye for now.
Thank you.
Bye.